In the space between moments, where time folds upon itself like silk through gentle fingers, there exists a place few mortals have ever glimpsed. It is called the Celestial Observatory, and it stands at the very edge of reality, where the threads of past, present, and future converge into a single shimmering tapestry. Here, in this sanctuary beyond the reach of ordinary hours, sits an ancient figure whose shoulders bear the weight of eternity itself. His name is Kronos, though the world has come to know him simply as Father Time. Tonight, as the final hours of the year slip away like sand through weathered hands, something extraordinary is about to unfold. For even time itself must sometimes change, must sometimes let go, must sometimes learn the hardest lesson of all, that endings are not failures, but necessary transformations. Let us enter this sacred space together, quietly, reverently, and witness the beginning of a journey that will carry us through the turning of the year. The observatory is vast beyond measure, its ceiling lost in darkness that sparkles with distant stars, its floor a mosaic of countless clock faces, each one marking a different moment in the infinite stream of time. The walls are lined with hourglasses of every size, from those small enough to rest in a child's palm to those so massive they would dwarf mountains. Some flow with golden sand, others with silver mist, and still others with what appears to be liquid starlight. At the center of this cosmic chamber stands a loom of impossible complexity. Its frame is constructed from petrified lightning and ancient wood from the first tree that ever grew. Thousands upon thousands of threads stretch across it, each one representing a moment in time, births and deaths, victories and defeats, whispered secrets and shouted declarations. Every thread pulses with its own subtle light, and together they create a luminous web of existence itself. Father Time sits before this loom, his gnarled fingers moving across the threads with a precision born of millennia. His robes, once white as fresh snow, have faded to the color of old parchment, and they bear the stains and tears of countless ages. His beard flows down past his waist, silver and gold intertwined, each strand containing within it the memory of a year gone by. In his right hand he holds a scythe, but its blade has grown dull from use, no longer the sharp instrument of decisive cutting it once was. Beside him rests his hourglass, the symbol of his eternal office, but even this shows signs of wear. A crack runs down its side, and the sand within falls unevenly, stuttering and catching as it descends. Father Time's eyes, which have witnessed the rise and fall of civilizations, the birth and death of stars, the first breath of every living thing, are weary beyond measure tonight. His hands tremble slightly as they work the loom, and occasionally he pauses, staring at the threads as if seeing them for the first time, as if struggling to remember why he continues this endless task. The air in the observatory grows heavy with anticipation. The hourglasses along the walls seem to slow their flow, as if holding their breath. The clock faces in the floor tick more quietly, their usual steady rhythm becoming hesitant, uncertain. Then, like frost spreading across a window, or like dawn breaking over a winter landscape, 12 figures begin to materialize around the edges of the great chamber. They appear gradually, not with the suddenness of magic, but with the natural inevitability of seasons changing, of day following night, of one breath flowing into the next. These are the 12 months, the spirits who govern the turning wheel of the year, and each one carries with them the essential character of their appointed time. January appears first, and he is unique among all the others, for he bears two faces. One looks backward with eyes full of nostalgia and wisdom, seeing everything that has been. The other gazes forward with eyes bright with possibility and perhaps a touch of anxiety, perceiving all that might yet come to pass. His robes shift between winter white and new spring green, never quite settling on either, forever caught in the threshold between what was and what will be. He carries a set of keys at his belt, each one capable of opening doors between past and future. February manifests next, hooded and cloaked in deep gray, the color of winter's longest shadows. She is the smallest of the months, the briefest, yet she carries perhaps the heaviest burden, for she is the keeper of endings, the guardian of grief, the one who understands that sometimes love means letting go. In her hands she holds a small lantern that burns with a cold blue flame, providing just enough light to navigate the darkest part of winter. March strides forward like a warrior returning from battle, armor gleaming, sword sheathed but ready. His presence brings with it the scent of rain and thunder, the feeling of wind that cannot decide whether to freeze or warm, the energy of conflicts both necessary and temporary. He is the breaker of winter's grip, the herald of change, whether welcomed or not. April dances into view, her movements unpredictable and joyful, now laughing, now weeping, now spinning with abandon. She wears garments that seem to be woven from rain and rainbows in equal measure, and flowers spring up wherever her bare feet touch the floor, only to transform into puddles a moment later. She is beautiful chaos, the reminder that not all order serves growth, that sometimes the world needs to be shaken loose.
May enters like a bride approaching her garden wedding, crowned with blossoms of every color, her dress a living tapestry of green leaves and opening buds. She moves with grace and purpose, carrying with her the scent of lilac and apple blossoms, the feeling of earth warming and ready to give birth to countless new lives. Her eyes are bright with the knowledge of potential fulfilled. June follows, radiant and crowned with roses, wearing white and gold, her presence bringing warmth without harshness, light without glare. She is the perfect noon of the year, when day and possibility both reach their fullest expression. Around her neck she wears a garland, symbol of unions blessed and promises made. Her smile is gentle but knowing. She understands that perfect moments are brief because they are perfect. July appears in gold and crimson, wearing the crown of the Sun King, his presence almost too bright to look upon directly. He carries with him the weight of summer's peak, the ripeness of fruit on laden branches, the drowsy heat of afternoons that seem to stretch forever. There is pride in his bearing, but also the subtle awareness that all peaks are followed by descent. August arrives with more practical bearing, dressed in harvest gold, his hands calloused from work, his face weathered and kind. He carries a sickle over one shoulder and a basket of grain over the other. There is satisfaction in his expression, the contentment of effort rewarded, but also the solemnity of one who knows that gathering always involves cutting away, that harvest requires separation. September enters quietly, dressed in scholars' robes of brown and amber, carrying a book and a lamp. His step is measured, thoughtful, as befits the month of transition between growth and decline. He brings with him the scent of apples and wood smoke, the feeling of crisp mornings and shorter days. There is wisdom in his eyes, but also a touch of melancholy. He knows what is coming. October materializes like twilight itself, neither fully present nor fully absent, wrapped in robes of rust and gold and deep purple. Leaves fall from his hair as he moves, and his shadow stretches longer than it should. He is beautiful in the way that dying things can be beautiful, when death is natural and timely and makes room for necessary rest. His presence is a bittersweet reminder that not all endings are tragic. November emerges from shadow, hooded in gray and black, his face barely visible, his form thin and insubstantial. He is the walker between worlds, the guardian of the threshold between life and death, light and darkness, memory and forgetting. Where he stands, frost begins to form on the ancient floor, and the air grows thin and cold. He speaks rarely, but when he does, even the loudest voices fall silent to listen. Finally, December appears, and she is magnificent and terrible in equal measure. The Frost Queen, they call her, and she wears a crown of ice and a gown of snow that never melts. Her skin is pale as winter moonlight, her eyes the color of frozen lakes. She brings with her the deep cold, the long nights, the silence that falls over the world when it sleeps beneath blankets of white. But she also brings the promise of rest, of peace, of the turning point when darkness begins to recede and light slowly returns. The 12 months form a circle around Father Time at his loom, and for a long moment no one speaks. The only sound is the soft whisper of sand falling through countless hourglasses, the gentle tick of infinite clocks, and the subtle hum of the cosmic loom as Kronos continues his work, his movements now slower, more labored, as if each passing of his fingers across the threads requires tremendous effort. January is the first to break the silence, and when he speaks, both of his voices sound at once, creating a strange harmony that seems to come from two different times speaking as one. Father Kronos, he says, his backward-looking face sad, his forward-looking face concerned. Father Kronos, the hour approaches, the year must turn, and yet... He trails off, but everyone in the chamber knows what he means. The old year should have already begun to transition. The old year should be releasing its hold, fading gracefully into memory, while the new year emerges to take its place. But instead, Father Time continues weaving, continues holding, continues carrying the weight of every passing moment, as if he can somehow prevent what must naturally come. February steps forward, her small form somehow commanding despite her size. When she speaks, her voice is soft but clear, carrying with it the weight of compassion earned through intimate knowledge of loss. "You are holding too tightly," she says, and there is no judgment in her tone, only understanding. Every moment, every thread, you clutch them as if letting go would mean they never existed at all. Father Time's hands still on the loom. For the first time in what might be hours or days, time moves strangely in this place. He looks up from his work. His ancient eyes sweep across the assembled months, and when he finally speaks, his voice is rough with exhaustion and something that might be fear. "Every moment I have witnessed," he says slowly, each word carrying the weight of ages. "Every joy and sorrow, every triumph and tragedy, every first breath and final word. If I let go, if I release my hold on this year, on this time, do they disappear with me? Do they become nothing? Do they cease to matter?" The question hangs in the air like frost crystals catching light. It is a question that perhaps every ending faces, that every conclusion must ask itself. If I fade, does my meaning fade as well? If I am forgotten, was I ever real? March takes a step forward, his warriors bearing, softening into something gentler. "You know the answer to that, Ancient One. You have shepherded countless years through this same transition. You know what happens to the time that passes." But Father Time shakes his head, and now the trembling in his hands spreads to his entire form. "Knowing and feeling are not the same thing," he whispers. "I have watched others make this journey, yes. I have presided over every ending, every transformation. But now that my own time comes, I find that all my wisdom feels hollow. How can I let go of what I have held for so long? How can I trust that these moments, these precious, irreplaceable moments, will not simply vanish like morning mist?" The 12 months exchange glances, a wordless communication passing between them. They had known this would be difficult. It always is when time itself must change. But the depth of Kronos' fear surprises even them. December moves forward with the grace of falling snow, her presence bringing a hush even deeper than the quiet that already fills the chamber. When she speaks, her voice is like wind over frozen lakes, beautiful and cold and utterly clear. "Father Time," she says, and though her words are formal, there is something almost tender in her tone. "You speak of letting go, but there is someone you must meet first, someone who has been waiting, trapped between your fear and the inevitable turning." She raises one pale hand, and the air before them begins to shimmer. Reality itself seems to fold and bend, creating a doorway into a space that should not exist, the liminal void. The nowhere place between years where the new year waits in suspension, unable to be born while the old year refuses to die. Through this opening steps a figure both ancient and impossibly young. It is difficult to look at directly, for it seems to flicker between forms. One moment an infant wrapped in swaddling clothes of starlight, the next a young child taking its first uncertain steps, then a youth standing on the threshold of countless possibilities. This is Aeon, though the world will come to know him as Baby New Year, and his very existence is potential incarnate. He moves with the uncertain gait of one who has never truly walked before, for he has been suspended in the void of waiting, neither fully real nor fully imagined. When he speaks, his voice carries both the clarity of new beginnings and the echo of all the years that have come before. "Father Kronos," the child says, and there is no anger in his voice despite his long imprisonment, only a kind of patient sorrow. "I do not come to replace you. I do not come to erase what you have been. I come only to continue what you began, to carry forward the thread that you have woven so carefully, so lovingly through all these turning ages." Father Time stares at the child, and something in his weathered face begins to crack. "But if you continue," he says, his voice barely above a whisper, "then I must stop. And if I stop, then I—" He cannot finish the sentence. The fear is too great, too fundamental. It is the fear that every ending faces, the terror of becoming past tense, of moving from is to was, from present to memory.
Before anyone can respond, the air in the chamber changes again. There is a sensation of doors opening and closing simultaneously, of being in two places at once, of past and future colliding in the eternal now. And then he appears, Janus, the god of transitions, the guardian of doorways, the lord of beginnings and endings. He is magnificent and strange, his body facing both directions at once, his two faces locked in eternal contemplation of what was and what will be. He wears robes that seem to be woven from the fabric of thresholds themselves, and in one hand he carries a staff, in the other a key. He walks forward, and with each step he seems to pass through time itself, his movement creating ripples in the fabric of moments. When he speaks, his two voices speak in turn, creating a dialogue with himself that somehow makes perfect sense. "Progress," says his forward-facing voice, bright and eager. "Tradition," counters his backward-facing voice, steady and sure. "Change is necessary," continues the forward face. "But what is lost in changing?" asks the backward face. "New possibilities emerge," argues the forward. "Yet the old wisdom fades," warns the backward. Back and forth they go, the eternal debate playing out in the space of a single being, until finally both faces speak in unison. And yet both are true, and both are necessary, and the doorway stands open regardless of our fear or our longing. Janus approaches Father Time and places a hand on his shoulder, the hand that holds the key, the hand that can unlock any door, including the door to understanding. "Old friend," says his backward-facing voice, the one that looks at Father Time directly, "you are not the first to stand at this threshold. Before you came Saturn, who held time's weight until his arms could bear it no longer. Before Saturn came another, whose name even I have forgotten, which proves both your fear and its futility. The names fade, yes. The specific memories of who held the thread blur with distance. But what was woven remains, Kronos. What was woven always remains." The chamber grows colder, though it is not an unpleasant cold. It is the chill of clarity, of truth spoken plainly. And into this cold moment, 3 more figures appear, materializing as if they had always been there, but were only now being noticed. The Fates have arrived. Clothos, the spinner who holds the distaff from which all threads originate. Lachesis, the allotter who measures each thread to its proper length. And Atropos, the inevitable, who carries the shears that no thread can escape,
no matter how precious, no matter how loved. They are ancient beyond measure, older even than Kronos himself, and they rarely appear directly in the affairs of time. Their presence now signals the severity of the crisis at hand. Atropos speaks first, her voice like autumn leaves falling on still water. "The threads are tangling," she says, holding up her shears, and in the firelight of the chamber, everyone can see that the blades are trembling, unable to make the cut that must be made. The old year clings to existence, and the new year cannot be born. If this continues, if the transition does not occur by the final stroke of midnight, the threads will not merely tangle, they will tear. Time itself will shatter like dropped glass, and the fragments will cut everything they touch. Lachesis steps forward, her measuring rod in hand. "There has never been a year that refused to end," she says, her voice measured and precise. "There have been years that ended in catastrophe, yes, years that ended in glory, years that limped to their conclusion, or sprinted joyfully toward the finish, but never in all the ages we have measured has a year simply refused to conclude. The cosmic order itself is at risk." Clothos, youngest of the three, though still impossibly ancient, speaks with more compassion than her sisters. "Father Time, we understand your fear. Every thread we spin is precious to us. Every length of time we measure carries within it countless moments of beauty and meaning. But understanding cannot change necessity. The year must turn, the thread must be cut, the new must be spun from the remains of the old." A long silence follows. Father Time sits at his loom. The new year stands uncertainly in the space between existence and possibility. The months form their circle. Janus holds his eternal debate, and the fates wait with the patient inevitability of those who have seen every beginning and every ending since the first moment sparked into being. Then, slowly, with the weight of ages in every word, Father Time speaks. "Tell me," he says, addressing not any single figure, but the entire assembly of eternal beings who have gathered in this crisis. "Tell me how. I know I must let go. My mind knows this, my wisdom accepts it, but my hands do not know how to open. My heart does not know how to stop holding. I am time itself, and I have never learned how to pass." The months exchange glances again, and this time it is September who steps forward, the scholar, the teacher, the one who bridges summer's abundance and winter's rest. "Then we must teach you," he says simply, "just as you have taught the world the rhythm of seasons, the measure of moments, the passage from dawn to dusk. We must now teach you the greatest lesson of all, how to become what you have always understood but never experienced."
Saturn emerges then from the shadows at the edge of the chamber. He is older even than Kronos, having held the burden of time before passing it on millennia ago. His beard is white as snow on ancient mountains, his robes the color of distant stars, and his eyes hold the deep peace of one who has already made the journey that Kronos now faces. He walks to the loom and places his hand over Kronos's trembling fingers. When he speaks, his voice is like bedrock beneath soil, like the deep foundation upon which everything else rests. "When I stood where you now sit," Saturn says, "I believed I would die. I thought that releasing my hold on time would mean ceasing to exist, disappearing into some void of forgotten things. But that is not what happened, Kronos. That is not what awaits you." "Then what?"
Father Time asks, and the desperate hope in his voice is almost painful to hear. What happens to the year that ends? Where do the moments go when they are past? Saturn smiles, and it is a smile of profound understanding. They become memory, he says, not the memory that fades and distorts, but the great memory, the eternal record that exists beyond the reach of forgetting. Every moment you have witnessed, every joy and sorrow you have held, they do not disappear, Kronos. They become part of the great foundation upon which all future moments are built. You do not die. You transform into something more permanent than the present ever could be. But to become memory, Kronos whispers, I must first stop being now. Yes, Saturn says gently, that is the price and the gift both. To continue as you are would mean trapping now forever in a single moment, preventing all future moments from ever being born. Is that truly what you want? To preserve yourself by destroying possibility? The question strikes deep. Father Time looks at the new year, at this child who flickers with potential, who carries within him all the moments yet to be experienced, all the joys and sorrows yet to unfold, all the choices yet to be made, and he understands, perhaps for the first time truly understands, that his fear is selfish, that holding on does not preserve what was, it only prevents what could be. What must I do? He asks, and his voice, though still afraid, now carries something new, resolve. The fates step forward together, moving as one being with three forms. Clothos speaks first. You must journey through the year you have lived. Lachesis continues. You must visit each month, each season, each turn of the wheel. Atropos concludes, and from each you must gather an essence, a lesson, a gift, a piece of wisdom about letting go. When you have collected all 12 essences, you will know how to release your grip. You will be ready to drink the elixir of transformation, which will allow you to become what you must be, the memory of this year, while time itself continues forward. December steps forward again, and now her icy beauty seems less frightening, more like the necessary rest that winter brings. I will help you, she says, but we must move quickly. Look, she points to the great cosmic clock that hangs suspended in the center of the chamber, and everyone can see that its hands are approaching midnight. They move slowly, reluctantly, as if the clock itself resists the turning it was built to mark, but they move nonetheless, each tick bringing the moment of transition closer. You have until the final stroke of midnight, 12 hours to gather 12 essences. If the clock strikes 12 and you have not completed the journey, if you have not learned to let go, then time itself will fragment, and everything, past, present, and future, will collapse into chaos.
Father Time rises slowly from his loom. The threads continue their work without him now, weaving themselves according to patterns he has set so deeply that they continue even in his absence. He takes up his scythe, dull though it is, and his cracked hourglass. These are his tools, the symbols of his office, and he will need them for the journey ahead. February moves to his side, this small cloaked figure who carries the burden of endings. I will go with you, she says. I am the shortest month,
the briefest moment in the year's turning. I know what it is to be small, to pass quickly, to exist in the time others often wish would hurry past. I know about endings, Father Time. Let me help you learn what I know. Kronos looks down at her, this embodiment of February's cold and darkness, and for the first time in many ages, something like gratitude warms his ancient face. "Thank you," he says simply. Janus approaches and places his hand on a section of the chamber's wall. Where he touches, a doorway appears, or rather a doorway becomes visible, for it has always been there, will always be there, existing in the eternal threshold between what is and what might be. "Through here," Janus says, his forward face looking at Kronos with encouragement, his backward face looking with compassion at what is being left behind. "Through here lies January, the beginning of the year you must now learn to end. The journey starts where all journeys start, at the threshold, looking both ways, seeing what was and what might yet be." Father Time and February move toward the doorway. The other months remain in their circle, their presence a promise that they will be waiting at each stage of the journey. The fates fade back into the shadows, their work for this moment complete. Saturn watches with the peace of one who has already walked this path, and the new year, baby Aeon, settles into the space between existence and potential, waiting for the moment when he can finally be born. As Kronos and February reach the threshold, the old god of time pauses and looks back at his loom, at the work of ages, at the threads he has woven with such care and attention. His voice, when he speaks, is soft enough that only February hears him. "I'm afraid. I'm so afraid." February reaches up and takes his weathered hand in her small one. "I know. Every ending is afraid, but fear and courage can walk together, Father Time. They have always walked together. Come, let us see what January has to teach us." Together, they step through the doorway. The gateway of retrospection, it is called, and it leads into the first month of the year's journey. Behind them, the cosmic clock continues its inexorable movement toward midnight, and the assembled powers of time watch and wait, hoping that the ancient god who has held the hours for so long can learn before the final moment how to let them go.
The transition through the gateway of retrospection is unlike ordinary movement. It is not walking exactly, nor flying, nor falling. It is something closer to remembering, as if the journey takes place as much in the mind as in any physical space. Father Time and February emerge into a realm that seems to exist in two times at once. Before them stretches a great hall lined with mirrors, but these are not ordinary mirrors. Each one shows not a reflection of now, but a window into what was and what might be. Some show moments from the year just passing, a child's first steps, a soldier's last battle, a wedding in spring rain, an old man planting trees he will never see grow tall. Other mirrors show possible futures, the paths the coming year might take, the choices yet to be made, the consequences yet to unfold. At the far end of this hall stands January himself, his two faces solemn and expectant. The light in this place seems to come from everywhere and nowhere, silver and gold mingling together, creating an atmosphere of perpetual dawn or dusk.
that liminal time when one day ends and another begins. "Welcome, Father Time," January says, both mouths speaking in harmony. "Welcome to the threshold where every year begins and ends simultaneously. I am glad you have come, though I know the journey ahead will not be easy." Kronos looks around at the countless mirrors, at the infinite reflections of moments lived and moments possible. "How do I begin?" he asks. "How do I start letting go of what I have held for so long?" January's backward-facing head speaks first, by understanding that letting go does not mean forgetting. "Look into these mirrors, Father Time. Every moment reflected here has already passed, and yet they still exist, not as living present, but as permanent past. They have not disappeared, they have transformed." His forward-facing head adds, "And by understanding that holding on prevents new moments from being born. Look at the mirrors showing what might be. Every one of them requires that the present release its grip, that now become then, that you allow yourself to transform from keeper of the present into foundation of the future." February touches Kronos's arm gently. He is asking you to see that endings and beginnings are not separate events, Father Time. They are one event viewed from different angles. When you learned to weave time, did you not learn that the warp and weft are different threads creating one cloth? Kronos nods slowly, beginning to understand. The journey ahead will require him to unlearn the very thing he has spent eternity perfecting, the art of holding on, of preserving, of keeping the present moment from slipping away. He will need to learn instead the art of release, of trust, of allowing what is to become what was, so that what might be can finally arrive. January approaches and places something in Kronos's free hand. It is a small crystal, perfectly clear, no larger than a tear. This is the first essence, the crystal of reflection. It contains the lesson of the threshold, that to move forward you must honor what stands behind you, that beginnings require acknowledging endings, that every new year carries within it all the years that came before. The crystal feels warm in Kronos's palm, and as he closes his fingers around it, he feels something shift inside him. Not a release yet, he is not ready for that, but perhaps the first loosening, the first sense that his grip, while still tight, is not quite as desperate as it was. "Thank you, January," he says, and his voice is steadier now, stronger. "I understand your gift. Every moment I have held will become part of memory, the foundation upon which future moments are built. I do not disappear by letting go. I transform into something more permanent." January nods with both heads. "Now go," he says. "February waits to show you her wisdom. Each month will teach you something different, and together their lessons will show you the way through your fear to the peace that lies beyond it." The mirrors around them begin to shimmer, and a new doorway appears, this one leading into February's realm, the garden of ice where memories are frozen in time. Father Time and February move toward it, but Kronos pauses at the threshold one more time, looking back at January's hall of mirrors. Will I remember this, he asks quietly? When I transform, when I become memory instead of now, will I remember what it felt like to be present? January's backward-facing head smiles with gentle wisdom. You will remember everything, Father Time. That is both the burden and the blessing of becoming past. The present forgets, for it must focus on now, but memory holds all things forever.
Satisfied, or at least comforted, Kronos steps through the doorway with February at his side. Behind them, January remains at his post, watching both ways as he always does and always will, guardian of every threshold, keeper of every transition, the God who understands that every ending is a beginning wearing different clothes. The cosmic clock continues its patient counting. 11 hours remain until midnight. 11 more essences to gather. 11 more lessons to learn. The journey has truly begun, and though the path ahead is uncertain, though the fear remains strong, Father Time walks forward now with something that wasn't there before, a small spark of hope that perhaps, just perhaps, letting go will not mean dissolution, but transformation, not death, but rebirth into a different kind of existence. February leads him into the cold garden of her realm, and the journey continues. Each step takes them deeper into the year's turning. Each moment brings them closer to midnight's final striking, and each essence gathered adds another drop to the elixir of transformation that will, if all goes well, allow Father Time to finally, gracefully, beautifully let go. The journey through the year is not a journey through space, but through memory and meaning. Father Time, carrying his dull scythe and cracked hourglass, walks beside February through realms that exist both within time and beyond it. Each month's domain is not a place in the ordinary sense, but rather a state of being, a quality of existence made manifest. In his weathered palm, the crystal of reflection pulses with gentle light, the first essence, January's gift. It reminds him that every moment he releases will not vanish, but transform, becoming part of the eternal foundation upon which future moments are built. The cosmic clock continues its patient countdown. 11 hours remain until midnight, 11 more essences to gather. The weight of his task presses upon him, but February's quiet presence beside him offers comfort. She knows about endings, this smallest of months. She has made peace with her own brevity. Together, they approach the boundary of February's realm, and the temperature begins to drop. February's garden appears gradually, as if emerging from mist or materializing from a half-remembered dream. At first, there is only whiteness, not the bright white of fresh snow in sunlight, but the soft gray white of winter's longest evenings, when clouds hang low and the world seems to hold its breath between one moment and the next. As Father Time's eyes adjust to this new realm, details begin to emerge. The garden is vast, stretching in all directions farther than sight can follow, and it is filled with sculptures of ice. But these are not ordinary ice sculptures shaped by human hands for decoration or display.
These are memories, frozen in the moment of their occurrence, preserved in crystalline perfection. Each sculpture is a scene captured in time. Here, a mother holds her newborn child for the first time, her face radiant with wonder and exhaustion and overwhelming love. There, a soldier kneels beside a fallen comrade on a battlefield that no longer exists, his grief so profound it seems to chill the air around the sculpture even more. Beyond them, an old couple sits on a porch swing, hands intertwined, watching a sunset they have watched together 1,000 times before, knowing without words that this may be their last. The sculptures are everywhere, millions upon millions of them, each one a moment that mattered, a memory that left its mark upon the world. Some are joyful, others heartbreaking. Some capture triumph, others defeat. But all of them share one quality. They are endings, the last day of school, the final performance, the goodbye at the train station, the phone call that changes everything, the moment you realize you have looked at something beloved for the last time. Father Time walks among these frozen memories, and his ancient heart grows heavier with each step. So much loss, he whispers, his breath forming small clouds in the frigid air. So much grief. Is this what letting go means? Is this the wisdom you wish to teach me, February? That release is simply another word for sorrow? February moves ahead of him, her gray cloak blending with the mist that drifts between the sculptures. When she speaks, her voice is patient, gentle, like a hand placed softly on a shoulder in the darkness. "Look more carefully," she says. "You see the grief, yes, but what else do you see?" Father Time pauses before one of the sculptures, a young woman saying goodbye to her childhood home, standing in the doorway with tears streaming down her face, a suitcase in one hand and dreams of the future flickering in her eyes. He looks at it closely, allowing himself to truly see not just the sorrow, but everything the moment contains. "She is sad," he says slowly, "but she is also excited. She weeps for what she is leaving behind, but her stance, she is already leaning forward, already moving toward what comes next. The grief and the hope exist together." "Yes," February says, and there is approval in her voice. "Grief is not the opposite of love, Father Time. It is love's continuation. It is what love becomes when its object transforms or departs. And hope is not the absence of sorrow, but sorrow's companion, walking beside it, reminding us that endings make space for beginnings." She leads Father Time deeper into the garden, to a place where the sculptures are older, their ice clouded with age, their details softening at the edges as centuries of frost have slowly obscured the sharpest lines. Here are ancient griefs, losses so old that the people who felt them have been dust for generations, tragedies from civilizations that rose and fell and left nothing behind but stones and stories. "These memories are fading," February says, "not because they don't matter, but because this is the nature of things. The pain softens, the sharp edges of loss become gentler. Time, you, Father Time, you have always done this for the world. You have allowed grief to heal, sorrow to transform, loss to become something that can be born. This is not cruelty, this is mercy." Father Time reaches out to touch one of the ancient sculptures, and at his touch, a small piece of ice breaks free, but instead of falling to the ground and shattering, it dissolves into water that is impossibly warm, and that water soaks into the frozen earth beneath their feet. Where it touches the ground, something extraordinary happens. A small green shoot pushes up through the ice, unfurling tiny leaves that should not be able to survive in this cold garden. But they do survive. They thrive, nourished by the melted grief, fed by sorrow transformed into sustenance for new growth. This is the wisdom of February, the small cloaked figure says. This is what I know in my bones, in my brief existence. Loss is real, grief is necessary, but they are not endings in themselves. They are transformations. The ice melts, the water nourishes, new life emerges, not in spite of the loss, but because of it. The grief opens space for growth that could not have happened otherwise. Father Time feels something shift in his chest, something loosen that has been held tight for so long it had become part of his fundamental structure. His eyes begin to sting, and he realizes with shock that he is about to weep. When was the last time he cried? When was the last time he allowed himself to feel the full weight of all the sorrows he has witnessed? I have seen so much loss, he whispers, his breath breaking on the words. So many goodbyes, so many endings, so much that was precious and is now gone. I have held all of it, carried all of it, tried to keep it alive by never forgetting, never letting go. But the weight, February, the weight has become unbearable. Then set it down, February says simply. Not forever, not into oblivion, but set it down here, in this garden, where grief is honored and also allowed to transform. Let the ice melt, Father Time. Let the tears fall. And so he does. For the first time in longer than he can remember, Father Time allows himself to feel the full measure of his accumulated sorrow. He thinks of every goodbye he has witnessed, every loss he has carried, every moment of beauty that passed too quickly, every life that ended too soon, every dream that died unfulfilled, every love that was lost to distance or time or death. The tears come then, flowing down his ancient face like rivers breaking through a dam that has held for too long. They fall on the frozen ground of February's garden, and where they land, the ice begins to melt, slowly at first, then faster, spreading outward in widening circles. The frozen memories begin to soften, to liquefy, to release their preserved moments back into the flow of time. And as the ice melts, the garden begins to change. The gray-white mist takes on hints of color, soft pink, pale green, the faintest touch of gold. The sculptures do not disappear entirely, but they lose their rigid, frozen quality. They become translucent, like memories viewed through the lens of time, still present, but no longer imprisoning the moments they represent.
Beneath the melting ice, the ground grows soft. Grass pushes up, tentative at first, then more boldly. Flowers emerge, snowdrops and crocuses, those brave early bloomers that dare to grow even when winter has not quite released its hold. They are small and delicate, but their presence transforms the entire garden from a place of preserved grief into a place of honored memory, making space for new life. February watches this transformation with satisfaction. She approaches Father Time and reaches up to catch one of his tears on her fingertip. The tear crystallizes instantly in the cold air, forming a perfect teardrop-shaped jewel that glows with soft blue light. This is the second essence, February says,
placing the crystallized tear in Father Time's palm beside the crystal of reflection, the teardrop of remembrance. It contains the wisdom that grief is not weakness, but the price of having loved, that tears are not destructive, but transformative, that sorrow, when allowed to flow, rather than being frozen in place, nourishes new growth. Carry this with you, Father Time, and remember, letting go does not mean forgetting. It means allowing what was to become fertile ground for what will be. Father Time closes his fingers around the two essences, feeling their warmth pulse against his palm. Something has changed in him. The weight he carries feels different now, not lighter exactly, but distributed differently, as if by allowing himself to feel the grief fully, he has somehow made it possible to carry it more gracefully. "Thank you," he says to February, and the words carry depths of meaning that simple gratitude cannot fully express. February inclines her hooded head. "The journey continues," she says. "March waits for you, and his lesson will be harder still, but you are ready for it now. The ice has melted, the tears have fallen. You have taken the first true step toward learning how to let go." Together they walk to the edge of February's garden, where the soft ground gives way to harder earth, and the mist begins to swirl with stronger winds. Ahead, thunder rumbles, and the clash of metal on metal rings out across the shifting landscape. March's realm approaches, and with it, the next stage of Father Time's transformation.
The transition from February's garden to March's battlefield happens with shocking abruptness. One moment, Father Time and February are walking through melting ice and emerging flowers. The next, they are standing on contested ground, where winter and spring wage their ancient, necessary war. The sky above them is a chaos of conflicting forces. Dark storm clouds roll and tumble, pregnant with snow on one edge and rain on the other. Lightning strikes dance along the boundary between the seasons, and the wind howls with voices that sound almost human. Some screaming defiance, others singing victory, all of them calling for battle. The ground beneath their feet is torn and scarred. In some places, snow still lies thick and stubborn, refusing to yield. In others, bare earth shows through, dark and rich and ready for planting. And in between, there is mud. Glorious, messy, chaotic mud, neither frozen nor dry, neither winter nor spring, but the transformation itself made manifest. March stands at the center of this conflict, and he is magnificent. His armor gleams despite the mud and rain, each plate inscribed with symbols of change and struggle and necessary violence. His sword is drawn, its blade crackling with the energy of storms, and his stance is that of a warrior who has fought countless battles and will fight countless more. But he is not alone on this field. Across from him, separated by a stretch of torn ground where winter and spring meet in direct opposition, stands a figure that makes Father Time's breath catch in his throat. It is a shadow warrior, dark as midnight, and its form is horribly familiar. It moves the way Father Time moves. It carries a scythe like Father Time's scythe.
It wears the bearing of one who has held time's weight for eternity. It is Father Time's shadow self, his resistance to change given form and substance, his fear made manifest and armed for battle. So, March says, his voice carrying easily over the storm's fury, you have come to face what must be faced. Every transformation requires this battle, Father Time. Every ending must contend with the part of us that wants to hold on, that fears the unknown, that would rather cling to familiar suffering than risk uncertain change. Father Time stares at his shadow self, and his shadow self stares back. In its dark eyes, he sees all his own fears reflected and amplified. What if letting go means ceasing to exist? What if transformation is just a gentle word for annihilation? What if the moments he releases truly do vanish into nothing? What if he is making a terrible mistake, sacrificing eternity for a promise that may prove hollow? I cannot fight myself, Father Time says, his voice barely audible over the wind. How can I battle my own fear? How can I defeat something that is part of me? March sheathes his sword with a sharp, decisive motion. That is the first wisdom, he says. You cannot defeat it. Every warrior learns this eventually. Some battles cannot be won through force alone. The shadow self is not an enemy to be destroyed. It is a part of you to be acknowledged, understood, and ultimately embraced. Then what am I to do, Father Time asks. If I cannot fight it, how do I move past it? How do I overcome my resistance to change? You stop resisting the resistance, March says, and though his words sound like a riddle, his tone is perfectly serious. You stop fighting against your fear and instead turn to face it directly. You speak to it, you listen to what it has to say, and then you make a choice, not to destroy it, but to transform it. The shadow warrior begins to move forward, its scythe raised, its form radiating menace and determination. Father Time's first instinct is to raise his own scythe in defense, to prepare for battle, but March's words echo in his mind. Stop fighting against your fear. So instead of raising his weapon, Father Time opens his arms. Instead of bracing for impact, he steps forward. Instead of resistance, he offers acceptance. I know you, he says to the shadow warrior, his voice steady despite his racing heart. You are my fear of ending, my terror of transformation, my desperate, aching need to hold on to what I know, even if it means preventing all future possibility. You are the part of me that would rather carry unbearable weight forever than risk setting it down. The shadow warrior pauses, its scythe still raised but no longer moving toward attack. For the first time, it speaks, and its voice is Father Time's own voice, hollow and echoing as if spoken from the bottom of a deep well. I am you, it says. I am the truth you do not want to face. If you let go, you will cease to be what you have always been. You will lose your purpose, your identity, your reason for existing. You will become nothing. Perhaps, Father Time says, and he takes another step forward, closer to the shadow, closer to his own fear. Or perhaps I will become something new. Perhaps what you call ceasing to be, others call transformation. Perhaps what you fear as death, others know as rebirth. You cannot know that, the shadow insists, and there is desperation in its voice now, the desperation of fear losing its grip. You cannot be certain that letting go will not mean annihilation. You only have their promises, their assurances. But what if they are wrong? What if the void is real and transformation is just a story told to make endings bearable? Father Time stops an arm's length away from his shadow self. They stand facing each other on the battlefield between winter and spring, between holding on and letting go, between the familiar past and the uncertain future. Around them, the storm rages on, but in this small space between them, there is a pocket of stillness. "You are right," Father Time says quietly. "I cannot know with absolute certainty. I cannot prove beyond all doubt that transformation awaits rather than oblivion. This is the nature of change. It always requires a leap into the unknown. It always demands faith." "Then how can you possibly choose to let go?" the shadow asks, and now its voice is not menacing but pleading, the voice of fear begging not to be abandoned. "How can you risk everything on mere faith?" Father Time reaches out and places his hand on the shadow warrior's shoulder. His touch is gentle, without aggression, the touch of one who seeks not to fight, but to comfort. "Because," he says, "the alternative is worse. If I cling to what I know, if I refuse to transform, I do not preserve myself. I merely postpone the inevitable while preventing new life from being born. I become a dam holding back the river, and eventually the pressure will shatter me regardless. The choice is not between letting go and holding on forever. The choice is between releasing gracefully and being torn apart." The shadow warrior trembles under his touch. "I am so afraid," it whispers, "so terribly afraid." "I know, so am I, but fear and courage can walk together. February taught me that. We do not have to stop being afraid. We only have to stop letting fear make all our choices." And then, with an act of will that costs him more than any battle could have had, Father Time steps forward and embraces his shadow self. He wraps his arms around the dark figure and holds it close, accepting it fully, acknowledging it completely, taking back into himself this part that he had tried to separate and deny. The shadow warrior does not resist. It melts into the embrace, its dark form beginning to dissolve, not into nothing, but into something else. It flows into Father Time like water absorbing into parched earth, like light blending with light, like one part of a divided self reuniting with the whole. As the shadow merges with him, Father Time feels a surge of strength, not the strength of conquest or domination, but the strength of integration, of becoming whole. His fear does not disappear. It is still there, still real, still whispering its warnings, but it is no longer in control. It has become part of him again, in its proper place, acknowledged but not dominant, heard but not obeyed. The moment the integration is complete, the battlefield begins to change. The storm starts to calm, the thunder grows more distant, the lightning becomes less violent and more beautiful, illuminating the sky without threatening destruction. And most remarkably, the contested ground between winter and spring begins to settle into a new state, not winter anymore, but not fully spring either, something in between, something transitional, something that contains both endings and beginnings in the same moment. March approaches, and his stern warrior's face is softened by something close to pride. "Well done," he says. "You have learned what many never do, that our shadow selves are not enemies, but separated parts of ourselves. When we try to fight them, we only strengthen their hold. When we embrace them, we reclaim the power we gave them through rejection." He reaches to his belt and draws a small dagger, its blade gleaming with rainbow light. But instead of offering it to Father Time as a weapon, he reverses it, holding it by the blade, offering the handle. This is the third essence, the blade of severance. It contains the wisdom that transformation requires the death of who you were, Not destruction, but separation, cutting away the old identity so the new one can emerge. You have already used this blade today, Father Time, when you severed your resistance from yourself and reintegrated it. Now carry this blade with you, and remember, sometimes the most courageous act is not to fight, but to let parts of ourselves die, so we as a whole can live anew. Father Time takes the blade, and as he does, he feels it merge with the other two essences in his palm, the crystal of reflection, the teardrop of remembrance, and now the blade of severance. 3 lessons learned, 3 transformations begun, 9 more before midnight. February nods in approval, though her face is still hidden in shadow underneath her hood. You are learning quickly, but the next lesson may be the hardest yet, for it requires surrendering control in a way that goes against everything you have practiced for eternities. Come, April waits, and she is impatient. The storm has passed completely now, leaving behind a world washed clean. The sky shows patches of blue between dissolving clouds, and the first warm breeze of spring touches Father Time's face with an unexpected gentleness. March raises his sword in salute, a gesture of respect from one warrior to another, and then he fades back into his realm, becoming one with the storm that even now is moving on to rage over other battlefields, other boundaries between seasons. Father Time and February walk forward, leaving the contested ground behind, moving into the next phase of spring, where rain and chaos wait to teach their own essential lessons.
The change from March's battlefield to April's domain is so abrupt it makes Father Time stumble, as if the ground itself has shifted beneath his feet, which, in a way, it has. One moment he is walking on solid earth, still muddy from the battle between winter and spring. The next moment, the ground is there, then not there, then there again, flickering between states like a lamp being switched on and off at random. This is April's realm, and the first rule of April is that there are no reliable rules. The landscape shifts constantly, never quite settling into any single form. Sometimes it is a meadow full of wildflowers bending in the wind, their colors so bright they almost hurt to look at. Then, without warning, the meadow becomes a forest where trees grow sideways as easily as upward, their branches heavy with blossoms one moment and dripping with rain the next. The forest melts into a city street where buildings lean at impossible angles and roads curve back on themselves in loops that defy geometry. The city street becomes a beach where the waves run backward, up the sand and into the sea, while shells roll themselves toward the shore and clouds drift downward instead of across. Nothing is stable, nothing can be trusted. And yet somehow, everything works. The sideways trees bear fruit, the backward waves clean the beach, the flowers and the flickering meadow grow stronger with each pulse between existence and non-existence. April herself appears without warning, suddenly occupying a space that was definitely empty just a moment ago. She is young and old at once, her face shifting between child's wonder and ancient wisdom faster than the eye can follow. Her dress is woven from rain and rainbows, and it cannot decide whether to be soaking wet or perfectly dry, so it settles for being both simultaneously. Her feet are bare, and wherever she steps, flowers spring up, only to transform into puddles of rainwater before withering back into flowers again. She is laughing when she appears, though at what, Father Time cannot tell. Then again, April seems the sort who would laugh at a joke only she understands, or perhaps at jokes that haven't been told yet,
or maybe at the fundamental absurdity of existence itself. "Father Time," she exclaims, clapping her hands together. "Oh, how wonderful! I was just thinking about you, or I will be thinking about you, or possibly I'm thinking about you right now. Time is so confusing, isn't it? No offense." "None taken," Father Time says carefully, trying to keep his balance as the ground continues its flickering between states. "Though I confess this realm is disorienting." Disorienting? April spins in a circle, her laughter like wind chimes in a storm. "Oh, that's perfect. That's exactly what it should be. Everything should be disorienting sometimes. How else do you find new orientations?" She dances closer, her movements impossible to predict. "You've come for my essence, haven't you? My lesson about letting go. But here's the thing." She leans in conspiratorially, though there's no one else to hear. "The lesson is that you can't control letting go any more than you can control which way the rain falls in my realm." As if to demonstrate, rain begins to fall, but it doesn't fall down. Some drops fall sideways, others fall upward. A few seem to fall in spirals, and one particularly ambitious raindrop appears to be falling in all directions at once. Father Time opens his mouth to protest this violation of natural law, but April places a finger on his lips before he can speak. No complaining about what's possible or impossible. That's old thinking. That's winter thinking. This is spring, specifically my part of spring, where anything can happen and usually does. She pulls her hand away and produces, from nowhere Father Time can see, a handful of dice. She tosses them into the air, but instead of falling, they hang suspended, slowly rotating to show different numbers on each face, except the numbers keep changing even as the dice spin, and some of the numbers aren't even numbers but symbols or pictures, or in one case, what appears to be a tiny functioning sundial. "This is your trial," April says. "Walk through my maze, find your way to the center. But here's the trick. There is no correct path. The maze changes faster than you can map it. The walls move, the exits become entrances. The center might be at the edge. What was left might now be right. You cannot logic your way through. You cannot plan. You cannot control." Father Time looks at the landscape around them, which is now settled into something that might be charitably called a maze, if mazes could be made of mist and music and mathematical impossibilities. "Then how do I find my way?" April's grin is pure mischief. "That's the question, isn't it? How do you find your way when all the old ways don't work, when careful planning leads nowhere, when logic ties itself in knots, when control is revealed as the beautiful illusion it always was?" She spins away from him, dancing into the maze. Follow if you can, or don't follow, or follow by not following. It all works out the same in the end, or the beginning, or the middle, or whatever this moment decides to be. And then she is gone, leaving only her laughter echoing from directions that may not technically exist. Father Time stands at the entrance to the maze, his weathered hands gripping his scythe and hourglass, the three essences pulsing in his palm. Everything he has learned over eternity tells him to assess the situation, formulate a plan, proceed methodically. But April's realm actively resists methodology. It laughs at plans. It treats assessment as a particularly amusing joke. February's voice speaks beside him. "She is right, you know. Letting go is not something you can control. You cannot plan the perfect moment to release your grip. You cannot organize transformation into neat steps. Sometimes you must simply jump." "But I am time itself," Father Time protests.
Organization and order are my very essence. Without method, without structure, without control, how can I function? That, February says gently, is exactly the point. You must learn to function differently, or rather, to allow yourself to be carried by chaos, trusting that the chaos has its own deeper order, one you cannot see but can feel if you surrender to it. Father Time takes a deep breath, then, making a decision that feels like stepping off a cliff, he releases his grip of control. He stops trying to analyze the maze, stops searching for patterns or logic or any kind of predictable structure. Instead, he simply walks forward. Immediately, the maze responds. The walls shift, but instead of feeling threatening, it feels almost playful, like dancing with a partner who leads with confidence. He turns left because left feels right in this moment, not because left makes logical sense. The path curves upward, defying gravity, and he walks up it because walking up feels natural, even though it should be impossible. As he surrenders to the chaos, something remarkable happens. He begins to laugh. Not the bitter laugh of someone who has given up, but the genuine laugh of someone who has just realized how much energy he has spent trying to control things that were never controllable in the first place. How much effort he has wasted trying to hold moments still when their very nature is to move. How seriously he has taken himself when the universe itself seems to be one elaborate, beautiful, cosmic joke. The maze seems to enjoy his laughter. The walls shimmer with approval. Paths open that were not there before, not because he has figured anything out, but precisely because he has stopped trying to figure anything out. He rounds a corner that might also be a spiral and finds himself in a small clearing where April sits on a throne made of solidified laughter. She is juggling again, but now she is juggling days. Actual days, complete with sunrises and sunsets, all compressed into small glowing orbs that she tosses and catches with casual expertise. "There you are," she says, as if he is the one who has been missing rather than she. Or, "There you were," or "There you will be." I love how those all mean the same thing and completely different things simultaneously.
She catches all the days at once, combining them into a single swirling orb that settles into her palm. "You've learned my lesson, Father Time. Look at you, laughing, surrendering, allowing yourself to be carried by chaos rather than fighting to control it. Do you know what that makes you?" "What?" Father Time asked, still grinning despite himself. "Alive," April said simply. "For the first time in eternities, actually alive, not just existing, not just persisting, but present in this moment without trying to organize it or control it or fit it into some grand plan. That's what spring does. It breaks winter's rigid order and reminds the world that chaos is not the enemy of life, but its very foundation." She stands from her throne, which immediately melts into a puddle that becomes a flower, that becomes a small singing bird that flies away. "Here," she says, holding out the swirling orb of compressed days, "the fourth essence, the raindrop of spontaneity. It contains the wisdom that unpredictability is not the enemy, but the friend. That not all change can be controlled, and that's not a failure of planning, but the very nature of existence. That sometimes the most important thing you can do is let go of the need to know what comes next." Father Time reaches out. In the moment his fingers touch the orb, it dissolves into liquid light that flows into his palm, joining the other three essences. As it does, he feels something shift in his very foundation. The rigid structure he has maintained for so long, the careful organization of moments, the meticulous weaving of time's threads, the absolute control over every second's passing, all of it loosens just a little, not collapsing, but breathing, not failing, but flexing, not weakening, but discovering a new kind of strength in adaptability. "Thank you, April," he said. "I did not expect to laugh today. I did not expect to feel joy in the middle of this journey toward letting go." "Of course you didn't," April laughed, already beginning to fade back into her chaotic realm. "The best moments are always the ones you didn't plan for, couldn't control, and didn't see coming until they arrived and surprised you into remembering what it feels like to be truly present." She blows him a kiss that becomes a breeze, that becomes a shower of apple blossoms, that becomes the sound of distant laughter. And then she is gone, and the maze dissolves, and Father Time finds himself standing at the border of April's realm, looking out at the next stage of spring's progress. The cosmic clock shows 8 hours remaining until midnight, 8 more essences to gather, 8 more lessons to learn. But something has fundamentally changed in Father Time. The weight he carries feels different now. Not lighter necessarily, but balanced differently, as if by learning to laugh, to weep, to embrace his fears, and to surrender control, he has discovered muscles he never knew he had, muscles that can carry the same weight, but with more grace, more ease, more joy. "The journey is nearly half complete," February observes, "and you are transforming already. Can you feel it?" "Yes, I can feel it. I am still afraid. The fear has not disappeared, but it is no longer the only thing I feel. There is grief, yes, but also gratitude. There is uncertainty, yes, but also curiosity. There is the terror of ending, yes, but also—" he pauses, searching for the right word. "Also, relief. The relief of finally being able to set down a burden I have carried for far too long." February nods, satisfied. "Then you are ready for what comes next. Summer awaits, Father Time, with all its abundance and intensity. May will show you the beauty of planting seeds you will never see bloom. June will teach you to bless unions you do not fully understand. July will tempt you with perfection and teach you why even perfection must pass. Are you ready?" Father Time looks down at his hands. The 4 essences pulse with warm light: reflection, remembrance, severance, and spontaneity. Each one a lesson learned, a step taken toward the transformation that awaits at midnight. His scythe seems less dull now, or perhaps he is simply beginning to understand its true purpose: not to kill, but to separate; not to destroy, but to allow necessary divisions so that new growth can occur. "I am ready," he says. "Let us continue." And so they walk forward, leaving spring's renewal behind, moving into summer's golden abundance, where the next lessons wait to be learned and the next essences wait to be gathered.
The transition to May's realm is gentle, a soft gradient rather than an abrupt shift. The chaotic energy of April's domain gradually settles into something more ordered, but no less vibrant. The air grows warmer, carrying with it the scent of 1,000 blossoms. The light becomes golden and generous, the kind of light that makes everything it touches appear blessed. May's garden emerges around them like a slow-growing dream. It is vast beyond measure, stretching to horizons that curve upward, as if the garden exists on the inside of some impossibly large sphere. Every inch of ground is alive with growth. Flowers bloom in riots of color: roses and peonies, tulips and irises, lilacs and poppies, and countless others that exist only here in this realm of pure potential. But it is not just flowers. There are vegetable gardens, with plants heavy with fruit and vegetables of every variety. There are orchards, where apple trees share space with cherry trees, where peach branches intertwine with plum, where the very concept of separate species seems quaint and unnecessary. There are herb gardens that fill the air with sage and rosemary and thyme. There are medicinal plants,
growing beside purely decorative ones, and climbing vines that wrap around everything in loving embrace. May herself walks among the plants, and she is exactly what you would expect the embodiment of late spring to be. She wears a dress that seems to be composed of living leaves and opening buds, and her hair is crowned with a garland of flowers that changes even as you watch, primroses giving way to peonies, giving way to early roses. She moves with grace and purpose, occasionally pausing to touch a plant here, whisper encouragement to a seedling there, her presence itself seeming to nourish everything around her. She looks up as Father Time and February approach, and her smile is warm and welcoming. "Father Time," she says, her voice like wind through new leaves. "I wondered when you would arrive. Come, walk with me. There is something I wish to show you." She leads them deeper into the garden, along paths lined with flowering hedges and beneath arbors heavy with wisteria. The garden seems endless, and yet every part of it is tended with obvious care. Nothing here is wild or neglected. Everything grows according to some grand design that balances freedom with structure, chaos with order, individual expression with collective harmony. "Tell me something, Father Time," May says as they walk. "In all your eternities of overseeing the passage of moments, have you ever planted anything?" The question catches him off guard. "I weave time," he says slowly. "I measure moments. I mark the passage of seasons. But plant? No, that has never been my purpose." "Perhaps not your purpose," May agrees, "but that doesn't answer whether you've ever done it. Have you ever put a seed into soil, knowing it would take time, your time, to grow? Have you ever nurtured something without knowing whether you would be there to see it bloom?" Father Time considers this. "No," he admits. "I have watched countless others plant and tend and harvest. I have marked the seasons of every crop ever grown, but I myself have never participated in that cycle. I have only observed it." May nods thoughtfully. "That is what I suspected, and perhaps that is part of your struggle with letting go. You have spent eternity watching the cycles of growth and death, planting and harvest, without ever truly understanding what it feels like to plant something you will never see mature." They arrive at a small clearing within the greater garden, and here the ground is freshly turned, dark and rich and ready. In the center of the clearing stands a single ancient tree, an oak perhaps, though its species seems almost beside the point. It is vast and gnarled, and obviously older than many civilizations, its branches reaching toward the sky with patient strength. Beside the tree, tools wait: a shovel, a watering can, and a small wooden box. "This is the heart of my garden. This is where everything begins and ends and begins again, and this is where you will learn my lesson." She opens the wooden box, revealing a single seed. It is unremarkable in appearance, brown, oval, no larger than a fingernail, but somehow it seems to pulse with potential, as if it contains within its small form entire forests waiting to be born. "Plant this," May says, offering the seed to Father Time. He takes it carefully, feeling its weight in his palm. "What will it become?" "That is the wrong question," May says gently. "The right question is, does it matter what it will become if you will not be here to see it?" Father Time stares at the seed. "But that is exactly the question that frightens me most. If I let go, if I transform, if I become memory rather than present, what is the point of planting anything? What is the point of creating or nurturing or building if I will not witness the outcome?" May gestures to the ancient oak beside them. "This tree was planted 3,000 years ago by someone whose name no one remembers. The person who planted it knew they would never see it grow to this size, would never shelter beneath its mature branches, would never witness all the life it would support over millennia. And yet, they planted it anyway. Why do you think that is? Father Time looks up at the magnificent tree, its branches spreading wide enough to shelter hundreds, its roots surely extending deep enough to stabilize the very earth beneath the garden. Because, he says slowly, working through the thought as he speaks, because the planting itself was the point, not the witnessing, but the acting, not the outcome, but the choice to participate in a future they would not see. Yes, May says, and there is quiet joy in her voice. Legacy is not about witnessing outcomes, Father Time. Legacy is about nurturing possibilities. It is about planting seeds in faith that the world will continue, that life will go on, that your small act of cultivation will contribute to something larger than yourself, something that continues long after your moment of planting has passed into memory. She hands him the shovel. Plant the seed, water it, speak a blessing over it, and then walk away, knowing you will never see what it becomes. This is my lesson. Letting go means trusting that your actions have meaning, even when you are not there to validate that meaning. It means having faith that the seeds you plant will grow in soil you will never walk upon again. Father Time kneels beside the ancient oak, and with hands that have woven time itself, he begins to dig. The soil is soft and welcoming, and the simple physical act of digging feels strangely satisfying. He creates a small hole, no deeper than his wrist, and gently places the seed within it. As he covers the seed with earth, he feels something shifting inside himself. He is about to walk away from this seed, never knowing whether it will sprout, never seeing what it might become. And yet, the act of planting it feels complete in itself. The not knowing, which he had feared, somehow becomes part of the gift rather than its absence. He picks up the watering can and pours water over the newly planted seed, and the water soaks into the dark earth with a soft, accepting sound. Finally, he places his hand over the spot where the seed lies buried, and he speaks, his ancient voice carrying quiet power. Grow, he says. Grow in soil I will not walk upon. Reach towards sun I will not see you greet. Put down roots in earth that will remember my touch only as a distant dream. Grow without me, and in growing, prove that my moment of planting had meaning even when I will not witness your becoming. The ground beneath his hand warms slightly, and he knows the seed has accepted his blessing. May helps him to his feet, and when he looks at her, there are tears in her eyes, tears of joy, not sorrow. Beautifully done, she whispers. You have learned what many never do, that participation in life's great cycles does not require witnessing every outcome, that planting seeds is an act of faith, not certainty, that your role is to nurture potential, not to control results.
She reaches into her dress of living leaves and produces a small object that seems to be condensed sunlight wrapped around a tiny green shoot. The fifth essence, she says, the seed of potential. It contains the wisdom that legacy is not about witnessing outcomes, but nurturing possibilities. Carry this with you and remember, you do not have to see the future to help create it. The essence dissolves into his palm, joining the other four, and Father Time feels something in his heart expand. A loosening, a release, a new understanding that his worth is not measured by his ability to witness and control every moment, but by his willingness to participate in the great unfolding, even when he cannot see the pattern his participation creates. Thank you, May, he says. I have been so focused on what I would lose in letting go that I forgot what I might gift to the future by releasing my grip.
Every moment I have held, every thread I have woven, they will continue to matter, continue to influence, continue to bear fruit long after I have transformed into memory. May smiles and nods. Now you begin to understand. Come, June awaits, and she has her own lesson to share. It builds upon mine, as all lessons build upon each other, as all growth depends on what came before, while reaching toward what comes next. They leave the clearing, and Father Time looks back once at the place where he planted his seed. He will never know what it becomes, and for the first time in his long existence, that feels not like loss, but like trust, not like abandonment, but like faith in the continuing story that will unfold long after his particular chapter has ended. May's garden gradually transforms as they walk, the wild abundance giving way to something more formal, more ceremonial. The paths become wider, lined with white stones that gleam in the summer light. Rose arches appear at intervals, heavy with blooms in every shade of white and cream and the palest pink. The air fills with the scent of orange blossoms and jasmine, and somewhere in the distance, music plays, something ancient and joyful and solemn all at once. June's realm is a wedding garden, but it is a wedding of more than simple human union. Everything here speaks of things joining, of opposites coming together, of divisions being healed through sacred commitment. Day marries night beneath one arch. Earth and sky exchange vows beneath another. Past and future stand hand in hand, promising to honor each other, even as they pull in different directions. June herself appears at the end of a long aisle formed by perfectly aligned rose bushes. She wears white and gold, and her beauty is not the beauty of youth, but the beauty of perfection, the exact moment when something reaches its fullest, most complete expression before the inevitable descent begins. She is crowned with roses and lilies, and her eyes hold the deep contentment of one who has witnessed countless unions and knows both their joy and their necessary sorrow. She smiles as Father Time and February approach. "Welcome to the wedding garden," she says, her voice warm as summer noon. "I am glad you have come, for there is a ceremony about to begin, and I need someone to officiate." Father Time blinks in surprise. "I am no priest," he says. "I have no authority to perform weddings." "On the contrary," June says, "you have more authority than anyone. You are time itself. And what is marriage but a promise made across time? What is commitment but the intention to continue loving even as time changes both lover and beloved? Who better to officiate than the very force that will test every vow, measure every promise, witness every moment of the union?" She gestures to a ceremonial space beneath an enormous arch of intertwined roses, red and white twisted together so thoroughly that it is impossible to tell where one begins and the other ends. Before the arch stand two figures, and they are unlike any couple Father Time has ever seen. On one side stands Joy, embodied, radiant, laughing, dressed in colors so bright they seem to generate their own light. On the other stands Sorrow, quiet, somber, dressed in deep blues and grays, eyes that have wept rivers. They hold hands, these two, and though they seem like opposites, like forces that should repel each other, there is tenderness in their touch, understanding in their gaze. "I don't understand," Father Time says. "How can joy marry sorrow? They are contradictions. They cancel each other out." "Do they?" asks June softly. "Or are they, like day and night, like inhale and exhale, like planting and harvest, two parts of one complete cycle?
Can you truly know joy without having experienced sorrow? Can you fully appreciate light without having known darkness? Are they really opposites, or are they partners in the dance of complete human experience? Other couples wait behind joy and sorrow. Birth and death stand together, both dressed in simple white. Beginning and ending hold hands, their forms flickering between young and old. Hope and despair stand side by side, and the space between them hums with tension and attraction in equal measure. These are the unions that make life whole, June explains. Not the simple coming together of similar things, but the sacred marriage of opposites, the commitment to hold space for both halves of existence, the wisdom to know that wholeness requires accepting contradiction. She places a small book in Father Time's hands. It is bound in white leather and gold thread, and when he opens it, the pages are blank except for a single line that appears as he reads, "Speak from your heart, and the words will be true." Officiate their weddings, all of them. Bless the union of opposites, even though you do not fully understand how they can coexist. This is my lesson for you, Father Time. Endings and beginnings are not separate events, but one continuous ceremony. Death is not the opposite of life, but its partner. Letting go is not the opposite of holding on, but its complement. They are married, these things, and have been since the first moments sparked into existence. Father Time approaches the arch where joy and sorrow wait. He looks at them, these embodied contradictions, these forces that should negate each other, and sees instead how they complete each other, how each gives meaning to the other, how neither could fully exist without its opposite. He speaks, his voice gaining strength as he goes. "Joy," he says, "do you take sorrow as your partner, knowing that sorrow will deepen you, will teach you gratitude, will make your brightness shine more clearly by contrast with darkness?" Joy's voice is like laughter made audible. "I do." "And sorrow," Father Time continues, "do you take joy as your partner, knowing that joy will lighten you, will remind you that darkness is not permanent, will prove that even after the deepest grief, happiness can return?" Sorrow's voice is like rain on stone, soft and persistent. "I do." "Then you are bound together," Father Time says, and as he speaks the words, he watches as joy and sorrow embrace, and in their embrace they do not cancel each other out, but instead create something new, a wholeness that contains both laughter and tears, celebration and mourning, light and shadow all at once. He performs the same ceremony for birth and death, for beginning and ending, for hope and despair, and for a dozen other couples who embody the necessary contradictions of existence. With each ceremony, he feels his own understanding deepening. He is learning what June wants him to learn, that his fear of ending is based on a false belief that endings and beginnings are separate, opposed, in conflict.
But they are not. They are married. They are one continuous event. The year ends and begins in the same breath. He lets go and is transformed in the same moment. Death and birth, closing and opening, release and reception, they all happen together, not sequentially, but simultaneously. When the last couple has been blessed, when the final vow has been witnessed, June approaches him. In her hands, she holds 2 rings, one gold, one silver, somehow fused together into a single band that is both and neither simultaneously. "The 6th essence," she says, "the ring of unity. It contains the wisdom that wholeness requires accepting paradox, that endings and beginnings are one continuous ceremony, that to let go of the old and embrace the new is not 2 actions, but one. Wear this ring, Father Time, and remember, you are not leaving something behind to go somewhere else. You are transforming within a unity that has always held both what you were and what you will become. The ring dissolves as it touches his palm, joining the other 5 essences. Father Time feels something fundamental shift in his understanding. He has been thinking of his transformation as a journey from here to there, as if he must abandon one state to enter another. But June's lesson shows him that it is more like a marriage, a joining of what was with what will be, a union that creates something new while honoring both partners. "I begin to understand," he says quietly. "Letting go is not abandonment. Transformation is not betrayal of what came before. It is all one ceremony, the ending that is also a beginning, the goodbye that is also hello, the closing of one hand that is simultaneously the opening of another." June smiles, radiant in her perfection. Now you understand, and just in time, for July waits, and his lesson is perhaps the most difficult yet. He will tempt you with the possibility of remaining at the peak, of stretching this perfect moment forever, but you will be ready to resist that temptation, for you now understand that even perfection must pass to make room for what comes next. They walk from the wedding garden, and behind them, the married couples dance together. Joy and sorrow, birth and death, beginning and ending, all of them moving in perfect harmony, proof that contradictions can coexist, that opposites can complete each other, that wholeness is not about choosing one side, but about embracing both.
The transition from June's wedding garden to July's summit happens with a sense of climbing, though Father Time's feet never leave level ground. It is as if the very air grows thinner, brighter, more intense with each step forward. The garden gives way to rocky paths, the paths to mountain trails, and the trails to slopes of bare stone that reflect the sun's light with almost painful brilliance. July's realm is the top of the world, not metaphorically, but literally. They stand upon a peak so high that clouds drift below them like a soft sea, and the sky above is a blue so deep and pure it seems to contain all the possibilities of summer within its endless expanse. The sun hangs directly overhead, neither rising nor setting, frozen at its zenith in a moment of perfect noon that seems to want to last forever. Everything up here is gold. The rocks gleam with it. The air shimmers with it. Even the few plants that manage to survive at this altitude, hardy grasses and tiny alpine flowers, seem touched by liquid sunlight. It is beautiful beyond words, a moment of such perfection that to witness it is to understand why people climb mountains, why birds dare the thin air, why anything would struggle toward heights where breathing becomes difficult and survival becomes challenging. July stands at the very peak, arms outstretched as if embracing the sky itself, and he is magnificent. He wears armor of polished gold and a crown that seems to be made of condensed sunlight. His face is strong and proud, showing no sign of the decline that must eventually come, no acknowledgement that this moment of peak glory will inevitably give way to summer's slow fade into autumn. When he sees Father Time and February approaching, he smiles, a smile of someone standing at life's highest point, having achieved the summit, reaching the apex of power and beauty and potential. "Father Time,"
he calls out, his voice carrying easily in the thin air. Welcome to the top. Welcome to the moment when everything is perfect, when the sun reaches its highest point, when summer stands at its fullest expression. Is it not glorious? It is, Father Time agrees, and he means it. The view from this height is extraordinary. He can see in all directions, the realms of all the months spread out like a tapestry, the patterns of time's turning visible in a way they never are from within the flow of moments. It is perhaps the most beautiful thing I have witnessed in all my long existence.
Then stay, July says, and his voice carries a seductive edge. Why continue the journey? Why descend from this peak? Why let go of perfection? You stand at the highest point possible. Remain here with me. Stretch this moment forever. Let midnight never come. Let the year never turn. Let the peak continue being the peak, eternal and unchanging. He gestures to the vista around them. This is what you fear losing, is it not? This perfection, this moment of absolute fulfillment when everything is exactly as it should be? Why allow it to pass? Why permit decline when you could simply stop? You are time itself, Father Time. Stop the clock. Remain at noon forever. Father Time feels the temptation. How easy it would be to agree, to halt the clock's progression, to freeze this perfect moment and live within it eternally. No more endings, no more letting go, no more fear of transformation. Just this endless golden now, beautiful and complete and unchanging. He takes a step toward July, drawn by the promise of permanence, seduced by the possibility of preventing the very thing he has spent this entire journey learning to accept. But then February places her small hand on his arm, and her touch is cool against his sun-warmed skin. She does not speak, but her presence reminds him of her garden of ice, of frozen moments that became prisons rather than preservations, of the wisdom she taught him, that grief must melt to nourish new growth. And he remembers May's seed, planted in soil he will never see, growing toward a future he will never witness. He remembers June's marriages of opposites, the unity of endings and beginnings. He remembers April's chaos and March's integration, and all the lessons learned on this long journey toward letting go. No, he says quietly, and the word costs him, for the temptation is real and powerful. No, July, as beautiful as this moment is, as perfect as this peak might be, to remain here would be to prevent everything that comes after. If I freeze time at noon, there can be no afternoon, no sunset, no evening, no night, no dawn. The cycle would break, new life would never emerge, the seed I planted would never sprout. July's expression hardens. But everything after this is decline, he says. Everything after the peak is the long, slow fall toward endings. Why choose that when you could choose this? Because, Father Time says, and his voice is steady now, clear, because the valley has its own beauty, because sunset is no less glorious than noon, only different, because autumn brings harvest, and winter brings rest, and spring brings renewal, and none of those can happen if I trap us all in an eternal summer noon. To cling to the peak is to deny the valley its purpose. He looks around at the golden summit one more time, drinking in its beauty, acknowledging its perfection. You are magnificent, July. This moment is magnificent, but magnificence that never ends becomes prison, not paradise. The peak is only meaningful because the valley exists. The climb only matters if you are willing to descend afterward and begin climbing again. July studies him for a long moment, and slowly his expression softens.
The hardness leaves his eyes, replaced by something closer to understanding, or perhaps resignation. "I knew you would say that," he admits. "I knew you would choose to continue, but I had to offer the temptation, for it is part of my nature. I am the peak, and the peak always whispers, 'Stay, don't leave, don't let this end.' That is what makes the peak seductive, and what makes leaving it brave." He removes his crown of condensed sunlight and holds it out, but as Father Time watches, the crown transforms into a small stone that burns with inner fire, a sunstone, golden and warm and pulsing with the energy of summer's height. "The seventh essence," July says, "the sunstone of culmination. It contains the wisdom that clinging to the peak denies the valley its purpose, that perfection is beautiful precisely because it passes, that the top of the mountain is not a destination, but a waypoint on a longer journey. Carry this with you, Father Time, and remember, every peak exists to be descended from, and that descent is not failure, but the natural continuation of the climb."
The sunstone joins the other 6 essences in Father Time's palm, and he feels its warmth spreading through him. He understands now, in a way he didn't before, that letting go of perfection is not about settling for less, but about honoring the complete cycle. The peak is glorious, yes, but so is the valley. Summer's height is magnificent, yes, but so is autumn's harvest and winter's rest and spring's renewal. "Thank you, July," Father Time says, "for the temptation as much as for the lesson. It helps me understand that my reluctance to let go is not wrong or shameful, it is natural. The year itself is reluctant to leave its peak, but natural reluctance must ultimately bow to natural progression." July nods, his proud bearing returning. "Now go," he says. "August awaits below, in the golden fields, and he will teach you about cutting away, about how harvest, like all necessary separations, is not violence, but liberation." The descent begins, the afternoon approaches, but do not mistake descent for defeat, Father Time. Sometimes going down is the only way to eventually climb again. Father Time and February begin their descent from July's peak, and the going down feels different than the climbing up. There is a sense of relief in it, a natural ease, like breathing out after holding one's breath for too long. The air grows thicker, richer, more comfortable. The golden intensity softens into something warmer, more welcoming. Behind them, July remains at his summit, arms spread wide, embracing his moment of perfect noon. He will stand there until his time passes, until the sun begins its slow descent toward evening, until July gives way to August and the peak becomes memory. But for now, in this eternal moment that is somehow also temporary, he is exactly what he should be, the height, the culmination, the glorious apex that makes the entire climb worthwhile. The cosmic clock shows 5 hours remaining until midnight, 5 more essences to gather. The journey continues, moving now from summer's heights toward autumn's harvest, where the next lessons wait in fields of gold and amber, where Father Time will learn about cutting away and the liberation that comes from proper separation. The descent from July's peak leads naturally into August's realm, and the change is both subtle and profound. The bare, rocky heights give way to rolling hills covered in grass that has turned from green to gold. The thin air becomes rich with the scent of grain and hay. The intense overhead sunlight softens to a warm golden glow that comes from a sun beginning its slow angle toward the horizon. August's fields stretch in all directions, an ocean of wheat and barley, oats and rye, all of it ripe and ready for harvest. The grain bends in the breeze, creating waves of gold that roll across the landscape like water, like music made visible, like time itself flowing toward its inevitable conclusion. August himself stands in the middle of his fields, and he is exactly what a harvest month should be. His face is weathered and kind, lined with the years of labor and the satisfaction of work well done. His hands are calloused, his clothes practical rather than ceremonial. He wears no crown, carries no scepter, only a sickle at his belt and a basket over his shoulder, the tools of gathering, the implements of separation. He smiles as Father Time and February approach across the golden fields, and his smile is warm as late summer afternoons. "Father Time," he says, his voice rough like grain rubbing against grain, "welcome to the fields. Welcome to the time of cutting away. I've been expecting you." Father Time looks around at the endless waves of grain, all of it beautiful, all of it ready. "This is remarkable," he says. "All this abundance, all this life." "Yes," August agrees, "but it cannot remain like this. The grain is ripe, past ripe, really. If I don't harvest it soon, it will fall to the ground and rot. All this abundance will become waste. All this potential will become lost opportunity." He draws his sickle and holds it up, the blade catching the sunlight. "Do you know what this is?" "A tool for cutting," Father Time says, and his hand instinctively goes to his own scythe, the one he has carried throughout this journey, its blade no longer quite as dull as it once was. "Not just cutting," August says, "separating. And separation is not violence, Father Time. Separation is liberation. Watch." He bends to the grain, and with practiced ease, he cuts a swath of wheat at the base of the stalks. The grain falls into his other hand, and he lays it gently aside. Where he has cut, the field looks bare, empty, almost wounded. But August gestures for Father Time to look more closely. "See," he says, "the stalks are cut, yes, separated from their roots, but look at what remains. The roots are still in the ground, and they will decay and enrich the soil for next year's planting. The stalks I cut are free now, free to become bread, to nourish life in a different form, and the seeds they carry will be planted again, will grow again, will continue the cycle. Nothing is destroyed. Everything is transformed through necessary separation." He holds up the cut grain and he says, "If I left this attached to its roots, if I refused to cut it away out of some misguided idea that separation equals harm, what would happen? The grain would become too heavy, the stalks would break, the seeds would fall and rot. By refusing to separate, I would not be preserving, I would be preventing the next stage of existence." Father Time stares at the cut grain, and something in his mind shifts, clicks into place. "My scythe," he says slowly. "All these ages I have thought of it as a tool of endings, a symbol of death, something to be feared and resisted. But you are saying, it is a tool of liberation," August finishes, "of necessary separation, of allowing things to move from one form of existence to another. You have been thinking of letting go as a kind of violence you must do to yourself, but what if it's actually a kindness? What if holding on is the violence and letting go is the relief?" He hands his sickle to Father Time and says, "Cut the grain with me. Use your scythe for its true purpose, not to kill but to separate, not to harm but to allow transformation. feel what it means to cut away not from cruelty, but from necessity, not from destruction, but from love. Father Time draws his scythe, and as he does, he notices that its blade is brighter now, sharper, no longer dull from disuse or doubt. He approaches the standing grain, and he feels a moment of hesitation. This is living, growing, beautiful. How can he cut it down? But then he remembers May's seed planted in soil he would never see, and June's marriage of opposites, and July's peak that must be descended from. He remembers that holding on past the proper time is not preservation, but prevention of the next stage of existence. He raises the scythe, and he cuts. The blade moves through the stalks with surprising ease, and as he cuts, Father Time feels something unexpected: relief. The grain falls away, separated from its roots, freed to become what it is meant to become, and he realizes that August is right. This is not violence. This is kindness. This is allowing transformation by cutting away what must be released. He cuts swath after swath of grain, and with each cut, he thinks of the moments he has been holding, the threads he has been clutching, the year he has been refusing to release. Each stroke of the scythe is practice for the larger letting go that awaits at midnight. Each separation of grain from root is a rehearsal for the separation of present from past, of now from memory. The work is meditative, rhythmic, almost peaceful. Cut and gather, the steady pulse of harvest, the necessary work of late summer. Sweat forms on Father Time's ancient brow, but it is honest sweat, the kind that comes from useful labor, and it feels cleansing. When he finally stops, breathing heavily but satisfied, he looks back at what he has harvested. The field where grain stood tall is now stubble, looking bare and empty, but the grain itself lies in neat bundles, ready to be threshed and winnowed and ground into flour that will become bread, that will nourish life in a different form. The apparent emptiness is actually fullness waiting to be transformed. August nods in approval. You have learned the lesson, he says. Cutting away is not loss, but liberation. Separation is not violence, but necessary transformation. The grain must be cut from the root so it can become bread. The year must be separated from present time so it can become memory. You must be severed from your old identity so you can become your new one. He reaches into his basket and pulls out a bundle of golden wheat tied with a simple cord. The eighth essence, the wheat of winnowing. It contains the wisdom that letting go releases energy for new growth, that cutting away is not cruelty, but care, that harvest requires separation, and separation is not death, but transformation from one form of existence to another. The bundle dissolves into golden light that flows into Father Time's palm, joining the other 7 essences. Father Time feels the energy of harvest settling into him, the satisfaction of work completed, the wisdom of knowing when to cut, the courage to separate what must be separated even when it looks like loss. Thank you, August, he says. I have spent eternities avoiding the very thing my scythe was designed for. I have thought of it as a weapon of endings, when it has always been a tool of transformation. I see that now. August smiles, his weathered face creasing with pleasure. Then my work is done, and you are ready for September. He waits in his library, surrounded by the accumulated wisdom of ages, and he will teach you about choosing, about what to keep and what to release, about how even memory cannot and should not preserve everything. Go now. The harvest is complete, and the next lesson awaits. Father Time and February leave August in his fields, where he continues his work of cutting and gathering,
separating and bundling, performing the necessary labor of late summer harvest. Behind them, the fields gradually shift from gold to amber, from summer's abundance to autumn's wisdom, and they move forward into the next stage of their journey toward midnight's transformation.